Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of Getting It Right, last year's Tangled Lies, and this year's Reckonings. I just love saying that. And I have a guest with me who has published 20 books, and he has 2 out this year. I mean, wow. So this is Thomas Laird. Did I pronounce your last name correctly, Tom?
Yep, Scottish word. It means landlord.
So
which has nothing to do with me.
Thomas Laird. And Thomas had the 2 books he has out this year, which he's gonna, well, maybe you could hold it up while I mention them. So the first one is Child of the Night. Look at this one, came out in March. Isn't that a great cover? And the next one that came out in July is called Ferocious. Yeah, look at that. And here's what one reviewer's recommendation said that I found. It said, give this author a read. He is a writer of fast-paced action with suspense thrown in it at almost every turn. So welcome, Thomas. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you.
All right. So I am really wowed by 20 novels. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your writing journey. What was the impetus for writing? Did you always want to be a writer? Tell us just a little bit about that journey.
One of my favorite quotes about writing is that it's 98% perspiration and the rest is inspiration. It's like a compulsion that, when you have it, and you're going to do it. And I'm one of those people who just don't believe in writer's block at all. I think if you can't write, it's because you have nothing to say. And the problem is that there are a lot of people that would like to have something to say, but don't really have that voice, because really what you're doing is you're talking to the computer or the keyboard. And it's just dialogue between you and it. And then it comes out as the narrative form. And so I started getting published back in 1994 with a collection of stories called Blue Collar and Other Stories, and had been writing short stories since I took a class at Bradley University. In fact, one of the stories I wrote at Bradley was called Freddy the Dancer and was published, my first short story published in San Francisco back in 1976. And we got a whopping $39 for it. My wife and I blew it in one night on pizza and beer, so that didn't last long. So royalties, unless you're, being published by the big 5 in New York, you're not going to be able to make a living on it. So it's not, unfortunately, for the money. It would be if I could be, like most writers would love it, but it's, there's a very select few people who do this thing full time. So it's a matter of whether you love it or you don't. And if you love it, you just keep at it and at it. I got a letter from James Lee Burke, the guy who authored all those Robichaux novels. And he said that you have to get pretty much alligator skin about critics and about how people respond to you. And you have to first and foremost believe in yourself, because if you won't, they won't. These days, in 2022, it's almost impossible to get a literary agent unless you're brand new or unless you have some kind of credentials, I suppose, from a writing school, an MFA or something like that, and people have heard of you in literary journals. You're just coming off coming out of nowhere. And it's very, very difficult to break in. I've had literary agents in the past, but not one of them has stole a book from me. I've sold all of them myself. One agent I had previously, before I sold Cutter in 2001, came on board with the 3rd book, but she never sold anything. I did. And we had another agent that actually did sell a book, and it was into the Czech Republic, and she sold it via Loom Books, not Loom Books, Constable and Robinson. So agents are difficult to get a hold of, and if you want to get published, novels especially, it's extraordinarily difficult. But if you love it, then there's no stopping.
You do it, right?
You just
As my son said to me too, he said, you have to believe in your book and just keep trying and keep trying. So the 2 that are coming out this year, Did you write them both? First, I'm going to ask you to tell us about them, but before that, before you tell us about each one, did you write them like in the last year, or was one of them an older book that you brought forward? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Child of the Night was written back in 2017.
Mm.
I sent it around, and, to agents and all that, and that didn't work out. And finally, just about a year ago, the first book actually I sent to Black Rose was the second one, Ferocious. And I already had an offer, so I took it. And then a couple of months later, after all kinds of revisions and all kinds of hoo-ha, they decided not to publish it and cancel the contract, which unfortunately is legal. So then I sent it to again back to Black Rose. They liked it the first time, and so they took it on. So that was written about a year ago, Ferocious.
Yeah, and cool, and they're both out. The publisher, the company that Thomas is referring to is Black Rose Writing, which published 2 of my 3 books and published the 2 that Thomas has out now. So what are these 2 books about? Are they related to each other in any way? Tell us a little bit about the books.
Well, the ones that I published with Constable and then later
No,
with,
these 2,
yeah, I know,
Ferocious.
but I'm saying the
Oh,
ones I
okay.
published with them were about a character named Jimmy Parisi, and Child of the Night is about Parisi's son, Michael, who is
Ah.
also a homicide detective. So that takes place in modern times. But all the Parisi novels go back to the 1970s and 80s. They were all kind of a series. This one was specifically the son. And the premise is, of course, something that's not unusual or unheard of, but about Jack the Ripper, who was never caught in the 1880s. And so in my book, he escapes London, escapes UK, and makes his way to the United States and winds up in my hometown, Chicago. And he's able to somehow control his inner demons and not slit people up anymore. And he has a wife and he has a child, and their offspring has other offspring, and so on down to the 21st century. And then there's a pair of twins who are both murderous by nature and have inherited the genes of great great grandpa. And one of them is more vicious than the other, but they're both killers. And so Michael's job is, of course, to get them. I don't write mysteries per se. In the first 20, 30 pages who did it. The point is like the old television show Columbo. How is he going to catch them? You know who they are right away, but are they going to get away? Of course, they're not going to get away with it. And the idea is, how will he catch them?
How will it
The other one,
unfold?
Ferocious, is a start of a different series. It's with Nick Karras, who's also Chicago homicide, and it's also set back in the 1970s. And I just finished the 3rd book in that series called With Extreme Prejudice. So Karras, to me, is going to be a recurring character.
So you have another novel that's finished and going to be out?
Yeah, two more actually. The second one in the Karras series is called Ravenous, about a guy who thinks of himself as a modern day werewolf, although basically what he is he's a psychotic. And Karras goes after him. The third one is a guy called the Crucifixion Killer, who kills 2 young girls coming out of abortion clinics because they have sinned greatly against his version of God. And so he murders them both. And the gory details you can get when you get the book, but he's the character in the 3rd of the Karras so far.
Very nice. Wow. Do you have a police background?
None.
No.
I talked to a friend of mine at a reunion, a high school buddy, and he was a homicide detective in Chicago. And I guess the books, for some reason, seem realistic to them. The story was, one day my wife, who was working as the school secretary where I worked, had a visitor, something to do with something legal, and he was a cop from up in the Chicago area. And my wife had a poster of the book. What was it? Black Dog? No, it was Season of the Assassin. Was on her window in her office because she was, real proud of her old man, so she showed it off. And this guy said, "Do you know the man who wrote that book?" She said, "Yeah, he's my husband." So you know what? We were reading that book up in a profiler school up in Chicago.
Wow.
So the FBI was using that book as an example. So apparently some people believe, basically what I do is make stuff up. But I read a lot of crime fiction. I read some, nonfiction crime and all that. And you can pick up a lot of things. You won't pick up much that's useful watching television or going to the movies. But people who've been there and people who research the thing, like Michael Connelly, I've read all the Bosch books. He's
I
very
love
well. He worked
them.
as a crime writer,
Yes.
as a newspaperman for crime. So he knows wherever he speaks. So you can pick
Yeah.
stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. So this show is called "What Are You Writing? What Are You Reading? What Are You Reading?
Right.
What Are You Writing?" So do you have some books that that you would recommend to our audience?
Yeah, I wrote them down because I'm horrible with remembering titles, but I've got
Sure.
a few here. I mentioned James Lee Burke previously,
Mm-hmm.
and I've read all the Robichaux books. He's not just a mystery or crime writer; he's a literary writer. He's an artist, and if you read his stuff, it's just head and shoulders above most of the whodunits that you see. And also, I mentioned Michael Connelly, the Bosch series. I've read all of those. I started about 2 years ago, and I've worked my way through all of them. He's
Yeah,
a wonderful character.
he
And that's
really
that's what
is.
you have to grab hold of. If you don't have a character that you can attach yourself to, I just have difficulty reading things that have, especially a lot of the novels. I won't mention them. We don't want any lawsuits, but they have despicable characters who have nothing. That doesn't mean your characters have to be good and they have to be pure and clean. They have to be human. There's got to be
Yes.
some kind of connection between you and them.
And some
Otherwise, it's
saving
impossible to go
grace.
on.
Yeah, they've got to have their good and evil sides. I agree with you. Whole people that you can connect to. So
Yeah.
those are great. I love Michael Connelly, period. I think he's such a good
Yeah.
writer. Was there somebody else you wanted to recommend?
The other guy, I think, if you really want to laugh out loud in a
Mm,
crime novel, is
okay.
Lou Berney. Lou Berney had a book out a while ago. I think it's supposed to be made into a movie called November Road. And his character's an ex-con. He's not a detective. He's not a good guy really, but he gets to you because he's human and he's frail, and he's always trying to make a big score, and it always, of course, blows up in his face. And his books are November Road, Long and Far Away Gone, Gut Shot Straight, and the newest of them is Whiplash River. I think he also writes for the movies too.
Cool. Cool, cool. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And if our audience wanted to find you, find out more about you, connect with you on social media, or find out more about your books, like how could they find you?
I have a site on Facebook called Thomas Laird Crime Writer. If you look it up on Google, you can probably connect with me there.
Excellent. All right. So that's something that you can do. I hope all of you great crime and mystery. Well, it's not a mystery though, because you know who done it, as
Yep.
Thomas said, but great suspense and crime books. Please check out Thomas Laird's books. And thank you so much for joining us today. Until next time, on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing?